Now, in the second hour, we're going to have actually a very serious guest on time travel. David Anderson, Dr. David Anderson, PhD, is a former United States Air Force officer, flight test engineer, and scientist who developed a passion for space-time study while conducting research at the prestigious Air Force Flight Test Center. Now, listen to this. For the last 20 years, he has been formulating and developing his breakthrough concepts in space-time physics and the study of time. His work led to the development of what today is called the time-warped field theory. His research holds the first promise for the development and application of practical time control technology. In 1995, Dr. Anderson founded the Time Travel Research Center, today the world's most advanced research laboratory dedicated exclusively to the study and development of time control technology and its application. His company also sponsors an organization called the Time Travel Research Association, which networks time travel information and interests from more than 80 countries around the world. Now, as you know, many of our nation's top theoretical physicists insist that with a proper amount of energy, time travel is definitely going to be possible. Therefore, if time travel is going to be possible, if that is an accurate scenario, then one might reasonably ask, well, then where are the time travelers? They ought to be here, right? They ought to be here. And I suspect they are here. Now, I'm not saying that when I begin picking up lines here in a few minutes, requesting to talk to any of you who claim to be time travelers, I'm not saying that these people are real, and I'm not saying they're not. That's for you to judge. All I'm saying is that it is reasonable to assume that if time travel will eventually be a reality, then there should be time travelers here now. There really should. So that's what lies ahead. Let's see what's in the news. Elian's father in the morning will come to the U.S. and will hope to take his son away. And you know what? I have no comments on this whole thing. It's going to be big in the news and probably real trouble for Miami. I hope they are braced for it, and I'm sure they are. Otherwise, I see nothing in the news that even merits particular comment from me. A partial birth abortion ban news. Let's see, GOP courting Hispanics with a new ad. Jewish settlers occupy Hilltop, West Bank. Microsoft going through its agony. Biotech food safety urged. North Carolina school ends same-sex class, really? Guess they thought that wasn't for 8th graders. So they're going to let them get back together again with the girls. Because there was this big thing going around saying that American education discriminated against girls in the classroom. That the teachers somehow regarded them as less important than the guys. So that's basically what the news is, not much. But time travel, that's different. Now, I do have to tell you what I do have. I have an awful lot of environmental news that's scary as hell. A global warming sea change, you know about that? The sea change temperature. A gigantic hole opening up in the ozone layer over the Arctic, which scientists believe will severely damage the natural shield protecting the northern hemisphere. That, guess what? That's us. From cancer-causing sunlight. So down in Australia, the children are required to wear headgear to school, and soon that may be the reality here too. In Cairo, French archaeologists have discovered the remains of a 4 3,000-year-old Queen's Pyramid, south of Cairo, complete with texts of special prayers previously found only with kings. And here's an article on Church Urged to Recognize Reality of Hell. It's a really interesting article, too. But this hour, what I want to do is talk to people, you out there, who claim to be travelers in time. Believe me, it's interesting. Strange, but interesting. So if you're a time traveler, call me. That's all we're going to take calls from this hour. People who claim to have arrived here, be here now, through time, through whatever method. Coming right up. All right, we are accepting calls this hour from time travelers only. If you have traveled in time, or you are presently a traveler to this time, then we want to hear from you. Otherwise, the phone lines are closed, but for that group, they are certainly open. With that in mind, top of the morning to you on the wildcard line. You are on the air. Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes. Hello?
Yes. We're here.
Yes, my name is Robert, and I am not quite a time traveler. I'm from a little bit different dimension than yours.
Well, that's...
And,
Okay. Listen, I think that may be virtually the same thing. You claim to be from another dimension.
yes, Senator,
I'm not a senator.
Oh, okay.
I just sit there. You haven't testified in front of a group lately, have you?
No, not at all.
Actually, there's no other way somebody would say yes, Senator.
Well, actually, my original dimension I'm from, you are a senator of Arizona.
Well, I'll be damned. Of Arizona?
Yes, basically...
Senator Art Bell. Arizona Senator Art Bell. Boy, that has a ring to it.
Yes, it does. Definitely does. Basically, what happened in my dimension, the South won the Civil War.
The South won the Civil War?
Yes, at the First Battle of Bull Run, basically that's where the Civil War ended. And I am from, in an alternate dimension, the Confederate States of America.
Wow! Now, if the South won the Civil War, all states would be Confederate, wouldn't they?
Well, no, actually, the original Mason-Dixon line holds. There is the United States of America, which runs
at the Pennsylvania-Maryland border, roughly.
Pennsylvania, Maryland border, and also up into Canada. In the Confederate States, shortly after that, basically, Lincoln resigned. I loved watching your Civil War. A couple of years ago, you had the PBS special, and it was a big hit in our dimension because it was something that, we never thought that had been possible. But,
so that special appeared in your dimension as well?
Well, it didn't appear in my dimension. We just basically brought it back. We've been able to...
What about history between the ending of the Civil War, which you say was different, and now? It must be indeed in your dimension entirely different.
It's entirely different. Basically what happened is the United States went ahead and invaded Canada. The Confederate States of America have basically went all the way to your Panama, which is basically Mexico all the way to Central America, or just Confederate States to us. Just another flag on our stars and bars.
So really, in that dimension, we physically possess how much of Canada?
It's all of Canada.
All right. I really wanted Canada for a long time, and so.
Or if you ever come over, if I ever meet you, I'll have to take you to where I live.
Can you do that? Is that possible?
Yes, that is possible.
What about this terrible conundrum of not being able to meet yourself, though? I mean, what if I came with you and met Senator Bell? Wouldn't I possibly blink out?
No. You're just a different person from him. You're not sort of difficult to explain. I don't know. My job basically is pretty much to go out. I'm retired.
I can hear the Southern accent in you, no question about it.
Yes, but no, I'm basically retired. my job was to go out to different dimensions and sort of scout them out and see basically how they differ.
You sound a little young to be retired.
Of
course, who am I to talk?
I've had rejuvenation. So.
Rejuvenation.
Yes.
Another advantage by the way, how should we consider this dimension? Is there a way to phrase where you say you are from? Is it a fourth dimension, a fifth dimension?
Basically, we've explored right now about 50 different offshoots of the planet Earth.
Holy smokes, you mean different dimensional renderings of Earth?
Basically, from our dimension, how time is split differently. There's a lot of of course, there's a couple of splits where the United States lost the Cold War. We, of course, there's several where we lost the Civil War. There's one where basically Nazi Germany won.
Nazi Germany won?
World War II.
World War II. Boy, what a hellish place that must be.
Yes, it is. It's extremely bad. We basically, well, I've talked to some of the people, they popped in and they saw swastikas in Richmond and they left. That's about all we know.
Now, our theoretical physicists are presently in this dimension beginning to realize there are other dimensions. Some of our best are saying that, but they're speculating 10, some more, and you're saying as many as 50.
50 that we've explored. There are a lot more. We didn't find, basically, we found part of this technology in Europa, which has an intelligent race. I don't know if it has it here. We haven't really got to the point where we could.
We're very curious about Europa in this dimension, thinking it might have some form of life, but probably fairly primitive.
Well, this is, I don't know quite how to explain it. This dimension is probably, it's fairly dangerous to go to.
The one we're in, you're doing the
Yes. Yes, the one that we're in currently, Senator. Yes.
Stop with the senator stuff, all right?
Okay. All right.
I'm not a senator in this dimension.
Okay.
And I don't much have respect for a lot of them either.
Okay. Well, then I apologize.
So, in fact, it worries me to even think that I might be one in another.
Okay.
But Arizona would be a good state.
It's a very nice state.
Anyway, this is no kidding on this dangerous dimension stuff. I mean, I'm reading this environmental news, and the ozone layer is getting gigantic to the point where they say it's going to be affecting us up north here the way Australia is affected. The ocean is warming. The storms are getting worse. Things are going to hell in a handbasket, really.
Well, we're concerned about that. We're also concerned about, I guess, how conspiratorial the United States government is.
Oh, we are so conspiratorial. Even my listeners, believe me, my listeners are so conspiratorial.
Yes.
I am too. Now that I think about it. But why are you here?
Basically, like I said, I'm here to basically to scout out different areas to determine whether or not to actually present ourselves to governments. That's one of the things I do.
Do you think that's a good idea, or do you think that's a dangerous? No, not such a good idea.
It's a very dangerous idea. We to basically say that I'm from the Confederate States of America.
That's going to get you in trouble right away.
It's going to get me in trouble. We did settle the slavery issue when Robert E. Lee was president.
So you're saying then that the Confederate States did not maintain slavery,
No,
perhaps a longer period of time.
It basically it went away. He had what was called a labuche plan, which slaves were able to buy their freedom, and they had a choice of going back to Liberia or staying here. And if they stayed here, they had to basically move out of the state that they were originally enslaved in. And at that time, we were basically we were annexing Mexico, and there was a lot of land down there.
So, boy, in your dimension, we have a lot more land. I mean, we swallowed Canada in one quick bite, and then a lot of Mexico as well, huh?
Well, the Confederate States took Mexico. We took Mexico, and then what you call the United States took Canada.
So you all were rebels with a real cause.
Yes, we were. I guess now.
You're a bunch of land grabbers is what you are.
Well, that was quite a while ago.
I know. That's what they say here too. So, what is the future for this dimension? Is it a rosy one or
I don't know.
kind of a weird one?
I guess the thing that we're most surprised about, since we've been to a lot of dimensions with this level of technology, is the lack of space travel that you have done. I've seen other, I've seen other areas with the same tech level or the same technology that you have, and they have already got a colony on the moon. They've already landed people on Mars. They're towing asteroids.
Listen here, I'm pressed by the clock. I've got to take a break. Do you want to hold on? You're really an interesting person.
Yes, I can hold on for just a little bit longer.
Just a little longer?
Probably maybe 10 more minutes. I really don't. It's a conspiracy. I really don't like this.
All right. Give me 10 minutes. Yeah, I've got that right. Stand by. In this dimension. I'm Mark Bell, and this is Coast to Coast AM. Don't touch that dial. All right, I'm only accepting calls from time or dimensional travelers, and I'm not sure there's a really big difference. And by the way, thank you for waiting, caller. Is there a big difference? I mean, isn't dimensional travel a type of time travel?
Not really. As far as our scientists can tell, no, not really. What happens is, I guess time is same. When I go back to my dimension, it's the same time as it is here.
So time is linear in each different dimension.
Yes, as far as we know. I guess one thing.
So that means Art Bell, the talk show host, and Art Bell, the senator, do they live to be different ages?
Yes, they can. I mean, I know of you at least in one other dimension where you host. You're not going to believe this. You host a talk show on the moon. You are basically broadcast from the moon.
From the moon. I would entertain that option if it were given to me. Listen, there's somebody who would like to ask you a quick question. On my international line, where are you calling from?
Hi, my name is Larry. I'm calling from Sudbury, Ontario, 300 miles from Toronto.
Actually, territory that isn't even actually Canada.
That's right.
There is an Ontario. It's just another flag in the United States.
All right. It's Robert, is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have a question. What are the cars like there? Are there Chevys, Fords? Do they drive differently? Same kind of transmissions? Some of the names of the cars?
Really good question, Tim.
Basically, we have what's called in Atlanta, which is Detroit, is what's called Trafalgar Ironworks, and they have a variety of different models and makes.
So, in other words, that is your Detroit.
Yeah, Atlanta is basically our Detroit. Basically, I guess what would be called a lot of. I'm going to be blank. I guess a lot of. Y'all prefer to call Negroes blacks. I want to make sure that I don't talk anything about blacks.
Blacks in this dimension would be proper.
Okay, would be blacks. The blacks moved up into, I guess, the Iowa area, and there's a very large town there called New Jerusalem, which is
New Jerusalem in Iowa.
United States.
Now he asked about cars. Can you describe any automobiles?
Pretty much they would be the same. Ours mostly run on electric. We don't have a lot of diesel.
Figures.
We in the South prefer big muscle cars.
How can you have a muscle electric car? I guess you could if you had enough electricity.
Do you have gasoline at all?
Yeah. Do you? What?
Hello?
We lost him. We lost him. He's gone. He's gone. We lost him. He said, out of gas. He said he only had 10 minutes, and I guess
that's true.
His 10 minutes are up.
But I love questions like that, Art.
Well, so Detroit is virtually in Atlanta, huh?
Yeah, interesting. I also want trains and aircraft.
How would you guys feel being consolidated as U.S., never having been?
Well, if it was the natural evolution of history, I mean, it would be fine. You know what I mean? long as you don't force the issue. I mean, if that's the way that it happened, well, that's the way that it happened. We're at the same time, Canada and the United States are both very different,
So you wouldn't have that
but
medical
very much
system.
the same.
You wouldn't have that medical system up there. You wouldn't have. You would have.
Well, that medical system is on the shaky legs right now. There's
Yeah.
a lot
I've heard that, yeah. All right. Well, listen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You take care. Well, in this dimension. First time calling a line. You are on the air. Hello.
Hello, Art.
Yes.
Art, how are you?
I'm quite well. How about yourself?
Well, I'm doing quite well, thank you. Listen, it's been a long time. I've been listening to you for years.
For years now, huh?
Yeah, yes, I have.
Are you a time traveler?
Well, yeah, something happened to me because of your show.
What?
Well, first of all, it goes back to 1995. I'm located up here on the Russian River in Santa Rosa, on KSRO country, and we were flooded. Our house was like basically cut in half. I was forced then to work many days in a row. I'm a truck driver. I've listened to you for years, late in the night, like you have
Yes,
mentioned.
yes. The time travel part.
Well, the time travel part goes like this. I was working so many days that I caught one of your shows, and I listened to Malachi Martin.
Yeah.
And he told me and or to most of your audience, how to pray, how to accept acceptance. And something happened, man.
What?
I'm tired. I've gone I'm running illegal. I'm going like 23, 24 days in a row.
I hear a lot of truckers do that.
Yeah, but
And so you had an epiphany on the road.
no, man, no. Something happened, and suddenly I got touched. I felt like I got hit by like a golden wand or whatever that hit on top of my head when
You sure that you just didn't bang your head on as you were getting out of the truck or something?
No. I made sure that that's not what happened. If anything, it woke me up to a lot more than what I knew in the past, and I started to see into the future. And what I started to see into the future was this. And I didn't see so much the doom and gloom. What I started to see was the things that the natural changes. We're going through a tremendous rate of change right now, and it includes all of us. But most importantly, what I saw in a flash, in an instant, what I saw was a better place to be. And
How far ahead is that? Because right now the signs, the canaries are dropping like flies here.
yeah, I realize the canaries are dropping like flies. I realize that we've got global warming, there's ships ice, melting and breaking
Right,
up.
so then when does it get better?
The better part is around the corner, and I would say maybe in 10 years. What I saw was something that flashed.
So you didn't actually, then you didn't really travel in time. You saw ahead in time is what you did.
I'm not exactly sure how you would say that. All I know is that something touched me.
Were you actually seemingly actually there?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to hear that.
No, hold on a second. I know what you're going to say, Art. I know what you're going to say. What? Come on, man. No, this is something that happened in an instant.
But what happened in a moment?
No,
I understand that. Look, there would be critics who would say, you said you were driving illegal, you were doing 1 million hours, you shouldn't have done it. You had a brain spasm.
No, it wasn't a brain spasm.
A trucker's brain spasm.
Well,
how do you know? Because that would be the criticism. Especially with what you said.
Well, I'll tell you exactly how I know. First of all, it was a warm feeling. It was the feeling of acceptance, and it kind of glowed the whole cab of inside my truck after so many years of not really believing, so to speak, being a hard kind of tough guy. And all of a sudden realizing and seeing something that was so cool. I said, there's something else out there. And it's powerful. And you know what? I got an immediate calm about me. And for a moment, the blink of an eye and a blink of your eye, what I saw, what was the state of the future. And
what you saw was a rosy future. All right, I've got it. So, trucking into the future. I guess we'll call that. The trucker. I can't rule out the possibility that he whacked his head as he got out of the truck. Or that his cab warmed up when he sort of fell off the cliff mentally after driving for so many hours. You've got to allow it at least as a possibility. East of the Rockies, you're on the air. Good morning.
Yeah, hi, Art.
Hello.
I've been doing some dimensional traveling.
Yourself, huh? So again, well, okay, then let me ask you like I did the first caller, who apparently had a prepaid phone card that ran out. Is time linear in dimension, as he suggested? It is. And from what is the dimension like that you are from?
It's very similar. And that's one problem that I had there was when I was sent, they gave me this special card that I was supposed to, when I come back.
You were sent.
Huh?
You were sent.
Yeah. And when I was supposed to come back, I was supposed to check it to make sure I was in the right dimension.
Yeah.
And it didn't match.
Oh, brother. So in other words, you're saying you were tossed here by mistake.
Well, we found out that there's so many multiple dimensions that it's almost impossible to get back to your own. You can get back to a similar one.
But getting precisely where you were is almost not possible. So it's like you're stuck here then.
Very difficult.
Well, if this one is kind of like the one you came from, or with very few, what are the differences? Can you describe any differences? Do they have dogs there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Houses?
Yeah.
Detroit? Car?
Right. The main
Ozone
difference is
depletion, ocean warming, all the problems we've got?
basically, yeah.
Any difference at all?
Well, there'd be differences like, okay, like that one guy, you'd be like the senator or, different senators, different congressmen at different times, little things. But basically, even if we lost the First World War in some dimensions, it ended up almost the same. There's different points of history that just absolutely have to happen.
Well, what about Canada and Mexico? And, I take it there is a Canada, there is Mexico.
Or, yeah.
Okay.
Well, there was one that I went to where Martin Luther King didn't exist. Malcolm X didn't.
These would be
radical.
very, very different then.
Right. The civil rights movement didn't happen.
Didn't happen. Then what would the state of blacks be in your dimension versus this one?
Well, in that one, they were still segregated out, whites only areas and malls,
Well, that stinks. So you're in a really, you should count your lucky stars that you're in a better place.
Right.
Huh.
Yeah, it's that dimension.
Are you bummed out that you're stuck here?
No. It's okay.
Do you frequently tell people what you're telling me now? No? That's probably a good idea.
Right.
They wouldn't, so a lot of people take it too long.
Not really.
Well, listen, I certainly appreciate you calling me.
Okay.
And you have a good night, sir. West of the Rockies? Wait a minute here. Do this again. West of the Rockies, are you there?
I'm here.
Good. You're on the air.
Yes. This is Bob in California.
Hello, Bob.
I met myself when I was 8 years old. I met myself.
Now, you see, I've heard you can't do that, but you're saying you can.
I met myself from the future. It was really, really weird. When I was 8 years old in grammar school, I'd play alone during the recess period.
Right?
Like behind a tree with my little army men and my cars.
Oh, yes, I played with Army men.
And this guy shows up, and he's like dressed all in white. It's almost like a uniform, and he had gray hair, almost white. And I kind of recognized him after the conversation, and I think it was me. But he asked me a lot of questions. He knew everything.
Oh, that's really intriguing. So, in other words, your older self from the future or a future came and met you.
Right.
How did you recognize yourself? How did you know it was you?
Good question. I think I recognized my teeth because I've got these very distinct bicuspid teeth that stick out, and I never had orthodontics. And I guess I had my permanent teeth like that age.
A sort of a Bugs Bunnyism?
Yeah, well, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad.
You identify it.
Yeah, it's like a fingerprint. And I recognized my teeth, and later, and I also recognized the mole that.
Other than your toothiness, how did you look? I mean, were you aging reasonably?
Well, at 8 years old, you're not all that discriminating, critiquing an adult. But I was clean. I had great white clothing, and I had gray or white hair. And I just asked myself a lot of questions about my brother and my parents, and thinking, what do you want to be when you grow up? It went back in time to life.
Now you're confusing.
Well, see, it's like sometime in the future when I'm 60 or 70 years old, I somehow...
Obviously, you will go back, right?
I get access to a time machine or some kind of astral projection or something.
And you, whatever it is, you will go back and meet yourself at 6 years of age or whatever.
Well, I think it was closer to 8 or 9.
8 or 9, whatever.
And,
I got it.
I wish I could tell you some information. I wish I had given you a few hints of things that happen in the future that I could tell your audience.
But most of the questions that you had, I mean, obviously, I understand they'd be personal.
Yeah, I just went back there to kind of get a glimpse at myself when I was a child.
Do you really remember, or do you remember both ends? Do you remember?
No, I only remember what occurred, when I was 8. I'm just 36 right now.
Right.
So I guess sometime in the future when I have white hair, I got a little bit of gray already. And I've got this mole that just showed up under my eye that this guy had.
Same mole, huh?
Yeah, well, I didn't have it, but I got it about 5 years ago. And
well, we're getting there. I mean, this is nearly enough to convict you if it was a crime. A mole and a toothiness and other general characteristics that you could see where you must have been really weird.
Well, it dawned on me until this mole sort of started growing on my cheek, and then I sort of thought back to that memory, and that's my face kind of growing. Think of yourself when you were 8. If you were to meet yourself today, would you recognize yourself?
What an interesting question. I was an annoying little SOB. I'd probably recognize myself. So, I guess, but I'm not, now that I think about it, I'm not really sure. So, but you obviously did, and what a weird thing it must have been.
I thought I just should share it with you, and maybe you can...
And how weird it must be to think that you are going to do it. I mean, this is something that lies in your fairly immediate future.
No, I have white hair in the person I met, so I think it's probably 30 years.
Yeah, well, 30 years, but 30 years are cosmically it's a blink in time. It's nothing. It's nothing. All right, well, listen, thank you very, very much for calling.
Okay.
I've got a scoop. We talk about time tonight, and we already have been, but now with an expert. I'm Art Bell, and from the high desert, this is Coast to Coast AM. Travelers in time, actually in dimensions. This hour, we're going to talk seriously about time travel. Actually, we were last hour too, or maybe not. You decide. But coming up shortly is David Anderson, who is a former United States Air Force officer, flight test engineer, and scientist. He developed a passion for space-time study while conducting research at the prestigious Air Force Flight Test Center. For the last 20 years, 2 decades, he's been formulating and developing his breakthrough concepts in space-time physics and the study of time. His work led to the promise for the development of the application of practical time control technology. Oh, doesn't that sound interesting? In 1995, Dr. Anderson founded the Time Travel Research Center. Today, the most advanced research laboratory exclusively to the study and development of time control technology and its application. The company also sponsors an organization entitled the Time Travel Research Association, which networks time travel information and interest from more than 80 countries all around the world. That's who's directly ahead, Dr. Anderson. All right, here comes Dr. David Anderson. Doctor, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Where are you, roughly?
We're located on Long Island, New York.
Long Island, New York?
That is correct, yes.
Way back there. All right, Doctor, I must tell you, time travel is probably the most interesting romantic notion and pursuit that I have. All my life I have contemplated its possibility, and so we're going to have a lot in common, I feel. How did you pray tell, with all your formal education, get involved in something so on the edge?
Well, it's amazing. I think to you and us today it's on the edge, but I think within the 5 to 10 to 15 years we're going to see a lot of common applications of time control theory and technology in our daily lives. Where I initially began, though, was when I was young, I always had an interest in mathematics and physics. And as you mentioned earlier, I did spend about 5 years doing research and development at the Flight Test Center. Flight Test Center in the Mojave Desert. There I got involved in space-time research, and I think the enlightening day for me was we were trying to solve a problem with some of our satellite systems. We had an unexplained variance in our satellite positions where they were drifting so much every year, and I was assigned to the project. We solved the problem, and about 2 years later, after solving the problem, I went back and I looked at the numbers. What fell out of that was a lot of new models with regards to space-time and its ties to magnetism and energy.
Okay, slow down. So you had an anomaly in one satellite or a constellation of satellites?
No, it was basically a number of different space-based satellite systems. They were drifting. Each year, we predicted, and we had many models available to us where satellites would be. Could be, yes.
Based on all kinds of factors, gravity, the orbit, a million different factors, I suppose. Huh?
Absolutely. But what was the confusing issue to everybody was the satellites were not where they were predicted to be. And it turned out that the bottom line was that it was due to the results of what's called frame dragging, a prediction that comes out of Einstein's general theory of relativity.
Frame dragging?
Yes.
What is that?
Well, frame dragging is a phenomenon predicted by general relativity that talks about how a spinning mass, like the Earth or the Moon, actually will drag space and time around it slightly to a very small degree.
I understand exactly what you're saying. The rotation itself is actually causing time and space itself to be slightly perturbed. Is that?
That is correct. That's a good explanation. Yes.
Wow. The implications of that then.
Well, I think the implications that came out of that art was that it wasn't so much that we solved the problem. What we realized, we came up with a new mathematical model that not only corrected the satellite predictions and where they should be, but it also illustrated to us some new relationships that existed between space and time and energy and electromagnetic fields. I guess a coupling of those different technologies that weren't apparent before. And from that coupling, that's when my passion, I think, it was always a passion, but like you, I think from that point, it really became an obsession.
Okay, but you point out the very prestigious Air Force Flight Test Center. Would you explain to the powers that be what you had discovered? How did they handle that? Because you were telling them something entirely new in science, and I wouldn't think they'd take that real well.
Well, you're absolutely right. Sometimes different establishments that were in place were slow to hear new ideas, but it really wasn't the case there. Initially, as I mentioned, the problem was solved with a mathematical model. And at the time when we solved the problem, we were very pleased. We were very happy. We had a new, reliable system to predict, where our satellites would be.
And ultimately, I suppose that's all they, bottom line, cared about. They wanted a predictable model.
That's correct. And I did not even recognize what I was holding in my hand until 2 years later. And at that point, I was just on my way to leave the Air Force, and I decided that I would pursue that research on my own after the fact.
And so where did you, you're back in private life, where did you take that research from that point? Or how did you proceed from that point?
Well, I spent probably a good part of, I would say, 8 to 10 years doing nothing but trying to refine that mathematical model, doing a lot of different research, a lot of different development, And I think the biggest milestone for me was I finally reached a point, I think in the early 1990s, where I realized that some types of time control technology were achievable today. And at that point, I began to fund and launch the Time Travel Research Center in 1995.
Okay, you keep saying time control technology. Define for me what you mean by that.
Time control is interesting because anytime you tell somebody you're working in space-time physics, the first thing they always joke about is, so your mission is to build a time machine. And I won't deny that that's a key focus and a passion for all of us here. But the initial application of our technology will be not for sending somebody through space and time. It'll be more for applications in everyday life. One of our key focus areas is in medical applications.
Or as they said in a recent great movie, baby steps.
They are, exactly.
So, what application of control of time can you imagine early?
Well, early on, I think two of our most high interest areas right now, where we receive most of our funding and most of our focus, is in two areas. The first is the medical industry, and the second is an industrial process application. And the medical industry is actually our short-term focus is the development of the capability to use this technology for organ preservation, to help store and preserve organs while they're waiting transplant. Now, the medical industry and the communities that we're working with right now really see that as a stepping stone. What they really want to see our time warp field technology used for is for eventually medical stasis fields that will help slow or stop the progression of disease and eventually.
You're already ahead of me. Now let's back up to organs for a second. Just a second. If you apply time control technology to the preservation of organs, does that mean, for example, that somebody who has a head trauma and dies, whose organs are going to be used for transplantation, in some manner or another, you would apply time technology to keep the organs fresh?
Yes, maybe the best thing to do would just be explain a little bit about what our time warp field technology is.
Okay, in a way we can digest, I hope.
Yeah, absolutely. Essentially, our time warp field technology allows us to create today what we call a small self-contained time warp field. The field size that we work with is about a 30 to 40 centimeter diameter field. So it's a spherical field. Within that field, we are able to adjust to a small degree the rate at which time passes relative to the time rate outside of the field.
Wow.
So an object inside of that field will experience a slightly accelerated or slightly retarded time rate relative to anything outside. So by placing an organ that's awaiting transplant inside of that field, we can actually slow down the rate at which time passes for that organ, making it preserving it much longer.
Absolutely fresh organs.
Absolutely.
But you're really, people need to know you're deadly serious about this. You say you can create a 30 to 40 centimeter. How big is that?
That would be roughly about 10 to 12 inches today.
10 to 12 inch area where time is either going faster or slowing down. Is it a cumulative process, Doctor? In other words, the longer something remains within this field, the longer the progression or regression in time?
Absolutely. Typically what we do is once we establish the field and we place an object or test instrumentation inside of the field, and we adjust the time rate, that time rate, say it's 50% of the rate at which time passes outside of the field.
Oh, really?
That is correct, yes.
You're telling me you've really done this?
Absolutely. I'm not saying that we're not without problems, but we have made some great steps and achievements, especially last year. Last year was a very successful year for us early on.
Good Lord, Doctor, do you realize what you're telling everybody here tonight?
I realize what we're telling everybody. I will tell everybody, though, also that as much as we've seen some great success, there are also many challenges that we face as well. So I think in many times, as much as we've had success, there are probably more questions now than we have answers for.
let me begin, and I guess there will be some proprietary information you can't give me, but how would such a field be created? Can you give me any broad outline?
Well, there is some proprietary information I cannot provide, but to give you a rough outline, creating the field, I'd say, would pretty much happen in a three-step process. First, we use an antenna configuration that introduces a high-speed rotational magnetic field in the core area of the field. Okay.
I had a feeling it was going to be that.
Well, actually, believe it or not, that's probably not the most important element. It's important. We found out from a stability standpoint it's important. But then we use an injector system that establishes what I'll just say is a necessary core environment, and that's the key element there is of a gas reagent. The third step is that we use a high-energy laser array to induce and then modulate the field. And this is, I guess I'll say for some of the scientists out there, this is similar, not identical, but similar to what's done in high-energy plasma physics.
Well, let me tell you what's blowing me away about this, all right? I don't know whether you are familiar with the story of the Philadelphia experiment.
Of course I am, absolutely. I share the same passion with you.
Okay, well, I've interviewed a number of people who claim involvement in that, and the description that they gave, Doctor, of the equipment that was used in that experiment, which really was a radar evasion experiment more than it was time travel or invisibility or anything like that. But they used rotating fields, magnetic fields, and RF as well, rotating RF fields. I'm trying to remember the exact configuration and power amounts, but are you familiar with the story vaguely?
Yes, I am. As a matter of fact, I know what they did is that they were trying to degauss the ship so it couldn't be detected by mines, so they were using magnetic coils around the ship with high-energy magnetic field. What I would say is that there is a big difference between what we're doing and there.
But also, as I heard you describe what created the field, the alarm bells were going off saying, ding, 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 that sound was similar.
Yeah, sometimes I wish I didn't have to say those four words, but it is an important part. What we found out was when we induce a field, the important part is establishing the right core environment, getting the gas reagent distributed properly, and then firing our laser ray into the field. Like I said, it's very, very similar to high-energy plasma experimentation. We found out, though, that the rotational magnetic field helped us solve some stability problems. It's a key component, but it's not a driving element.
Well, excuse me, but this is going to be breaking news for a lot of people, Doctor. I mean, that we can even do this. It's certainly news for me, and I didn't expect you to tell me this tonight. I thought you would be a theoretical research group only, not actually involved in the hardware. And so what you're saying tonight is a total blowaway for a lot of people. You understand that?
Again, I understand that, and I guess I would let people know as well. As much as we have seen progress, like I said, we have many challenges. We see the benefit to the medical community. The organ preservation experimentation that we're doing right now, that's a stepping stone. Like I said, the medical community has their eye on the possibility of eventually stasis field disease regression.
Sure.
The other area are where a lot of people are expressing interest in even funding our degrees for industrial process acceleration. And when I say that is, there are many scientific and industrial processes that take a tremendous amount of time to complete. And the ability to accelerate certain test processes or industrial process or chemical reactions
would have obvious, tremendous economic value.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. For us, it's kind of interesting. Our biggest, from our heart, our biggest area is to see the application of this into medical applications, because we see it offering a tremendous, not only a brand new field of technology, but a tremendous benefit for people around the world.
Well, of course it would be. It would be, Mr. Anderson's one step for mankind. Neil Armstrong's one step, you're Anderson, for mankind. A giant leap for mankind is what it would be. to be able to preserve organs with actual time. Time travel might not be the right phrase for it, huh?
That's why I carefully use the word time control technology. Like I said, we all here have a passion that someday we might be able to build that great machine of fiction, but now we see the short-term applications being very, very different.
If you look 50 years, 100 years ahead, if you project your research out 100 years, could there be a time machine?
I think the answer to that is yes, or I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing.
Well, I have a lot of.
Art, the one thing I would say is one thing we have not done. We did early last year. We had demonstrated our time rate acceleration and retardation using mechanical and electrical clocks.
Yes.
But we're always hesitant to use it on a living organism.
All right.
What we did last year.
Hold that. It's a great place to hang everybody up, including me. I want to hear this. Stay right where you are. All right, back now to Dr. Anderson, Dr. David Anderson, and I must tell you that obviously many of you are going to want to read more. On my website right now is a link to Dr. David Anderson's website, which is www.time-travel.com. So if you go to my website, just click on that link. You can do a lot more reading about what you're hearing about right now. Would that be accurate, Doctor?
That would be very accurate.
Good. All right. Now, obviously, you experimented first in this field you created with inanimate objects of some sort.
Yeah, that is correct. Our test instrumentation we use both mechanical and electronic clocks test instrumentation.
Clocks.
And up until earlier last year, we really avoided doing any testing on living organisms, at least early on.
Up until last year.
That's correct.
If you took a normal clock, a wound clock that was accurate, and you put it in the field, what could you prove, or what you
would have would be a perfect demonstration, which we've done over and over again, of showing how the time rate acceleration happens. We place one clock within the field outside of the field as a reference clock, and then you can show the divergence as the field is adjusted.
And how much divergence have you demonstrated?
Oh, actually, it's very specific. We've been able, again, we use the term reference time rate. That's the time rate, the rate at which time passes outside of the field.
Right.
Within the field, we go up to 300, an accelerator 3 over the reference time rate. And inside the field, we've been able to stably go down to about 13.2% of the time rate, actually slowing the rate at which time passes.
Holy smokes.
And we've even gone below that, but when we go below that, we do run into some, I guess I'll say, not stability problems, maybe a easy way to put it.
Stability problems.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons why we really haven't tested.
How would a stability problem manifest?
Well, let's see. I'm trying to think of a real succinct way to put this. We have, when we create a field, there's obviously a time rate outside of the field and a time rate inside the field. There's a variance. And inside what we call the boundary layer, which you can picture as a thin shell, like an eggshell, around that spherical field.
Right.
That shell area, the boundary layer, is where the time rate actually changes. And it has a peculiar effect of Dopplering frequencies and energy. So what happens is that if we have certain types of energy inside or outside of the field, heat can be Dopplered up to light, light can be Dopplered up to other things, higher temperatures could be, and light can be Dopplered up to gamma radiation. And what happens is, when I said the stability problem, our shell boundary layer is a very thin shell. The word shell is very applicable, all the way from 300% down to about 13.2%. What happens as we try closer to the zero time rate, when we pass through it, that shell actually expands and becomes thicker. And that Doppler effect carries all the way through almost to the center of the core. And when we did our first test last year on plant seedlings, our first test on living organisms, we actually ended up cooking about 80% of the plant seedlings that were inside the
Did you
field.
say cooking them?
Yeah, literally.
With regard to inanimate objects, just backing up for a second, if you are you able to actually observe the object within the field?
Yes, we are. Actually, a question we get asked a lot. Our first project, we call it Project Darkstar. That's the study of our time warp field technology. And yes, we can see objects in the field. As we accelerate the time rate, it actually, frequencies get Doppler down, moving from inside the field to outside. So you actually see a darkening and a more of an opaqueness to the object as we accelerate it. As we reduce it, you see the reverse. But yes, we can observe.
That's amazing. That's amazing. That's like magic. To a lot of us who had no idea such a thing was going on, it's like magic. So the inanimate object begins to darken down.
Yeah, and it's not the object itself. It's really just the Doppler effect, again, that we see within the boundary layer of the field.
In other words, optically, how it's appearing to us because of what it's being subjected to.
Yeah, basically, every color has a frequency, and as the light or that color moves outward through the field, when we're accelerating time, that frequency is actually dropped or down, so colors will actually shift in shades when we're accelerating slowly, and it gets more dramatic as we increase the time rate divergence.
Now, you mentioned seeds, and I can understand that as a very early biological experiment. But what about what in that field or the creation of the field would be cooking the seeds?
Well, again, what happened is to maintain the field. As I mentioned, there were 3 steps in implementing the field. The third one was inducing the field with the reagent with a high energy laser array. We have lasers, and then after a field is induced, the lasers still fire at a certain pattern. When they do, they're inducing energy into the boundary layer of the field. That energy, again, if we're retarding time, is Dopplered up, which takes it up to, depending on the degree which we're trying to retard time, it'll actually Doppler that up to more harmful radiation. So when I say cook, I'm not necessarily saying heat.
I understand.
Radiation.
Is the laser the modulating agent?
The laser is used. We need a certain amount of energy in the field to maintain it, and that's what the lasers are used to do. Our first model of our time warp field generator included 3 lasers and one, we call it an injector sensor array. Our current model we're using right now has 12 lasers and a 6-sector sensor array on it. So we actually have 12 lasers that are used to maintain and modulate the field.
To create such a field, Doctor, do you have any concerns about safety? Has that occurred to you as you've been moving through this incredible experimentation that I think nobody knew about till now?
Well, the answer is yes. You mentioned early on baby steps, and that's something that's actually very important to us. A lot of people ask us, why haven't we tested this on animals or people yet? And there's 2 reasons. The first one is the field size is too small. But more importantly, this Doppler effect, or this boundary layer where it Dopplers energies and frequencies, literally can have very damaging effects on living tissue. And we know...
So you might end up cooking a mouse, for example.
Exactly. Or radiating the mouse is maybe a better way to put it. But we know we can solve this problem. And when we solve this problem, the impact this technology could have on research and finding cures for diseases like heart disease, cancers, diabetes, and AIDS is absolutely profound. And eventually, when we can use this on a living person, the science fiction days of stasis fields or disease regression field might not be science fiction anymore.
What do you believe stands behind the ability to subject biological entities to this? In other words, in the manner that you now create the field, there's going to have to be a whole new manner of the creation of that field to avoid the effect on biological organisms, isn't there?
Yeah, that's correct. But the first issue is understanding the boundary layer better. And I got to tell you, we've had great successes in the last 2 years, and we're making some great results. But when it comes to the boundary layer and understanding it, which is very important to us, we must understand it better. We have more questions than we have answers.
Sure.
But to give you an example, when we had our 3-laser system, compared to today, we had to inject about, I think it was close to, I can't remember exactly now, it was about 20 to 25 times more power to induce and maintain the field. As we've learned more about the boundary layer, we've now cut that back by a factor of 20 to 25. So as we bring that energy down, and that's actually the biggest achievement here, is to be able to create a time warp field with a lower amount of energy. As we bring that energy down, it's going to help solve the problem.
Cold fusion trying to get to room temperature.
Yeah, I guess I never looked at it quite that way, but I guess you could say that, certainly. Some analogy there.
Whew, this is so much to digest. When I asked about safety, when you create a time warp field, is there any danger? It's kind of like when they dropped the atomic bomb. They first, many credentialed scientists thought it might ignite the entire atmosphere. There might be a chain reaction or atmosphere. They didn't know when they pushed the button. They really didn't know. So when you create a field like that, was there any concern as you approached throwing that first switch that something totally unexpected might occur that could be dangerous?
I think that feeling grows every day. It's not that we've had any major problems. We have a lot of respect for what we do. Respect for the technology and the risk. I mean, we run this like a full-blown flight test almost. I mean, I'll give you an example. Our typical live experiments run maybe about 2 to 3 hours. The pre-planning and the effort in the pre-experiment preparation runs about 2 to 3 days. In the post-experiment analysis cycle, in the modification for the next can run a week or 2. So to give you an idea, that gives you a little bit of proportion. You have a lot of respect for it.
Without getting specific, Doctor, because you may not want to, I don't know. What you mentioned funding. Obviously, the kind of work you're doing requires a lot of money. Where does the money come from? What kind of courses?
Well, early on, I had to fund a lot of my own research. Now, funding, and I think it's no secret, we get funding from both private investors as well. Some agencies in the government have interest in what we're doing. But to be honest with you, the largest part of our funding and interest, it comes from really 2 areas. If I had to give you the top 2, one, it would be from the medical community, because they see the long-term possibility. They also have a lot of money to invest there. The second area, outside of that, I'm trying to think, it's almost a toss-up, but we do have some interest from the government. But I'd say number 1, it really is the medical community. And then there's some people with regards to industrial process and research or scientific test acceleration.
With regard to any funding that might be coming from the government, an obvious question. What application do they appear to be interested in?
Well, I really can't talk a lot about specifics.
Okay, I'll read right between that line, no problem. I think I know the answer to it.
Well, what I can say is that that's what a lot, actually, believe it or not, the one thing is that a lot of people hear the name Project Darkstar, which is the name we gave our initial project to explore time warp field technology. And a lot of people think that it sounds very sinister, like a military weapons program. Actually, it was only because of the Doppler effect in the boundary layer and what we saw visually.
You named this Project Darkstar until you made the observation of the field change.
That is correct. And I tell you, to sit here and observe this thing, it's absolutely amazing. You said it before, that when you see something like this work, we all know that gravity and time can warp space and time. That time is not. This is all science fact. It's not science fiction. But to see it actually in action at this scale is absolutely fascinating.
Mind-boggling, actually.
It is, and I think what's interesting is I think we don't even get after the amount of time I've spent on this. I never lose my fascination and wonder when I see us open up a field and start time race. But the people who see this field in operation are the most interesting thing is they always call me back in a month, 3 to 4 weeks. And they say, I can't look at the world the same way. I said they knew in their back of the mind that time we're not an absolute, and that time is mutable. But when you walk down the street anymore, you don't.
I understand that. How could you look at the world, everything in the same way at all, ever again, once you had observed that?
Well, what's amazing? Sometimes you have to ask the opposite question. And I just say to your listeners, how can you not look at it? We know. I mean, the fact that time is mutable can be dilated, and that we live in a universe that's made up of a type of energy. This is the fabric of the universe and the world we live in. But sometimes we tend to shrink the size of the magic of all the wonder in the world to the size of our daily routine and material possessions. We have a cultural and biological evolution that we've been through that lets us look at time in one specific way.
Let me rip you back to the reality or the myth of the Philadelphia experiment. Do you think, Doctor, that there really was such an experiment? The reports of its effects may have been overblown, or maybe they were right because they talked about some pretty horrible injuries that occurred. Is that possible in your way of thinking?
Oh, wow. It's such a hard question because there's so much information on the subject out there. It's hard to know what was real, what wasn't. And unfortunately, I wasn't there, Art. I wish I could.
But I'm saying, based on what you know now about what you have done, if they had been doing what was described at that time, is it possible they would have done great biologic injury to the volunteers?
I think, again, the technology that we're using is drastically different. But I think the answer to that is yes. I think you're pretty familiar with the dangers of electromagnetic radiation. Is it due to a rip or tear in time, or was it due to the radiation effect?
Or a little of both.
A little of both.
I mean, you'd be cooking people with immense amounts of RF, rotating RF fields, as was described in that experiment. And so it could have been both.
What's interesting, Art, is that obviously my background includes it's probably 20 years of math and science. And what's interesting is I just started opening up my mind about a year ago and doing more work studying the nature of time and philosophy. But we also run, and I'm not trying to plug here, but I think it would be helpful for your listeners. We have an organization called the Time Travel Research that's dedicated to studying topics of time travel on any subject, from the Philadelphia experiments and Montauk projects to philosophy to art to religion, all the ramifications. And I think when you ask me the question, do I believe, I'll just tell you, I'm not going to say I don't believe. Because as I've studied more and more outside of the rigid walls of math and physics that I've grown up in and lived all my life in, I realize that there's much to be learned there.
Is it just coincidence, Doctor, that you're on Long Island?
I can anticipate where you're going with regards to the story of the Philadelphia experiment and the Montauk project being moved to Montauk. Is it a coincidence? Consciously, it is a total coincidence. Who knows subconsciously? Maybe there's a master plan or a path for me somewhere in the universe that led me to Long Island near Montauk. But, consciously,
I mean, that must have entered your mind.
You know what? And yes, people ask me the question all the time. Actually, the Time Travel Research Center, when it was founded in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, and we still run one small office there.
Maybe so, but you're in Long Island.
And now we're in Long Island, yes, our base of operations out here.
Oh my goodness, what the future might hold for you, huh?
Absolutely.
You must spend a lot of time thinking about that. I certainly would. That's incredible. Listen, Doctor, hold on. We're at the top of the hour, so you've got a good break here. Oh my. Did any of you have any idea that this was going on? That you can actually move forward, accelerate time, manipulate time in a forward direction, or to some degree in reverse as well. And now, we'll be right back. What a night. All right, some absolutely fantastic claims being made, and so once again, I think this is important. David Anderson, the man you're listening to right now, is a former U.S. Air Force officer, flight test engineer, and scientist. He developed a passion for space-time study while conducting research at the prestigious Air Force Flight Test Center, where he found actually cured an anomaly in satellites being not where they ought to be. And that led to all the time study. For the last 20 years since, he's been formulating and developing his breakthrough concepts in space-time physics and the study of time. His work led to the development of what is today called time-warped field theory. His research is the first promise for the development and application of practical time control technology. In 1995, Dr. Anderson founded the Research Center, today the world's most advanced research lab dedicated exclusively to the study and development of time control technology and its application in Long Island. His company also sponsors an organization called the Time Travel Research Association that networks time travel information and interests from more than 80 countries around the world. Here he is again. Doctor, welcome back.
Thank you.
All right, I think it's worth a minute to take some time to ask you about the nature of time, or what you believe with your research you understand, if anything at all, about the nature of time itself.
Oh, Art, I love this question.
Good.
Well, I think the best way to start with that question is to say that probably for about 2,000 years people have been asking it, and I've offered many answers, and I don't think I can improve on that. But I think one of the most important things that time is, to many of us, a very strange and curious thing. And one of the tests I'd encourage your listeners to do, if they haven't done it already, walk up to a friend or a family member or a stranger on the street and ask them, do you know what time is? And they'll all nod their heads like, absolutely, yes, they do. And they're almost sure to answer yes. But when they do and you explain it, they'll never have an answer for you. They cannot find the words to explain what time is. And what's interesting is, even as far back as the 4th century, St. Augustine even said it differently. He said, what then is time? If no one asks me, I know. If I wish to explain it to one that asketh, I know not. And it tells you it's a very deep insight into what the psychology of time really is. I think also, sometimes I think maybe after 2,000 years we don't seem to have a good definition for time.
No?
Maybe perhaps we don't want to understand it. A lot of times people talk about time with a negative connotation because maybe it's linked to our immortality.
Sure, it's our enemy ultimately, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, my favorite quote that captures that whole meaning is from Star Trek Generations, time is the fire in which we burn. And the other one is, time is a great teacher, but unfortunately it kills all its pupils. I feel that way sometimes.
But it may not necessarily always be so.
I think that is correct. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. I think, this is actually an interesting area for me. I'll talk about it too much, or you have to reel me in. But,
No.
A lot of times we feel that time exists independent of us. But honestly, perhaps this belief is really just an illusion, and time is really something that is measured and perhaps created in our mind and our body's perceptions. Maybe time doesn't really exist. Maybe time is really measured in the mind.
It is after all. It is our invention in a sense, isn't it? It's just a perception. In other words, objects move. We measure that movement, the stars and planets, and therefore we know that it takes time, X number of, we can measure units of something or another for an orbit, say. But really, that really may be our invention.
That may be an invention. That's exactly right. If you look at physiological, biological time, maybe it's the impression it leaves on the mind. I mean, our mind expects the future, which then becomes the present. When it becomes the present, our mind attends to us, and then it becomes the past, which we remember. Maybe that future and past doesn't really exist. I think what's even more interesting, Mark, if you look at the world of quantum physics today, I have so many friends working in this field, and you look at what's coming out of the hard science, out of the particle accelerators and super colliders, with the notions of time and space that were offered by the Hindus, the Buddhists, and the Taoists 2,000 years ago.
Well, I was going to ask, in other words, you're working on the hardware aspect of time manipulation,
That is correct.
which is really fascinating to me. But there may be another way to manipulate time in the metaphysical arena, or do you sort of?
You know, the answer to that question, I have an answer that I can't really back up well. Again, my whole life has been living in the world of mathematics and physics and living within the rigid walls, inside the walls of analytical science. But I personally believe that as we keep developing our time control technologies and the applications emerge and we look at true time travel or interdimensional travel, I think as much as we'll look at it with regards to technology and science, in terms of hardware, I think at the same time we'll see great advances coming out of the study of the human mind and metaphysics.
Maybe so. But coming back to your hardware, if you put a time warp field, aren't there, in other words, what about this old thing of you cannot go back and meet yourself, or you would destroy yourself or something like that, or kill your grandfather, you know, all these problems with potential time travel. On a smaller scale, wouldn't those problems also exist? In other words, if you had a clock in a field and it's coming out of either the past or the future, in essence, when you bring it out of the field, doesn't it in essence collide with itself? Isn't there a potential problem there, or is there not? And if not, why not?
I don't believe in cause and effect or cause and consequence or whatever you want to say. I believe that effect is dead. I think that that our world, the science, mathematics, and physics now show that time travel to the future, time travel to the past, or time control technology is all real science. I think this notion of cause and effect is more along the lines of like, for instance, it's nonsense to suggest that a moving object shrinks and gets heavier, or it's nonsense to suggest that an astronaut who travels to a distant star is younger than her twin brother she left behind. But it's not science fiction. It's science facts. And I think what we see here are really, these are sometimes what we call paradoxes. But I think these paradoxes are places where our rational minds really bump into their own limitations.
Well, I wouldn't see a paradox involved in, for example, an astronaut, as you point out, traveling, coming back, and relatively not having aged. Don't see a paradox there. But in creating a field, a time warp field, as you have done, I do see a potential paradox or effect of some kind. In other words, here we've got something rushing as you bring it back from the future or the past back into the present again. How? My mind can't wrap around that concept.
I think there's, when we talk about the twin paradox or the astronaut traveling at high speed, okay, you're absolutely right. That's a time dilation in a forward direction. It's very simple to understand, and they're right. There's no way to go back into the past and change the cause and effect. But if you look at what Kurt Gödel did and Frank Tipler with regards to closed time-like curves and rotating cylinders, they have shown that travel to the past does not violate the laws of math and physics. It's reverse time travel. Again, time travel to the past.
I'm not familiar with them. Please, what have they done?
Well, Kurt Gödel, it was a German mathematician. He came up with the concept of something called a closed time-like curve. And oh wow, this could be a very detailed conversation.
That's all right.
Essentially, it shows that there's a concept called a light cone that many of your listeners might be familiar with. It's a space-time diagram, and it shows that if you're an object, you must move forward in time. If you move forward in time, you can't move at a faster speed than the speed of light. So, for every place in space, there's what's called a light cone, where the forward faces the future faces in one direction, and the past faces in another direction.
Okay.
However, the orientation of the future and the past, or space-time at every point of space, we live in a world in a universe of curved space-time, can be different. So what Kurt Gödel showed, and he was the first person to present it, was that if you're in a curved space could be created by heavy gravity. That light cone, if you followed a sequence of light cones that each pointed in a different direction, eventually they can move back on themselves.
Heavy gravity as in really heavy gravity.
Very
As
pretty
in
heavy gravity.
edge black hole type gravity, right?
Not quite that magnitude.
No?
Very close. Yes. And Frank Tipler took Kurt Gödel's work and he expanded greatly on it. He published a number of papers called the Tipler cylinder or the rotating cylinder. And it talks about a hypothetical cylinder large, infinitely long cylinder you could build in space, heavy enough mass you rotate it, you could actually fly a ship specific path, go back into the past. And what's most exciting about this, I'd encourage your listeners to read about it, is it is the first proof that shows that travel to the past does not violate the laws of math and physics.
Well, that would be like Star Trek. In other words, they travel in essence, hyperdimensional space along a specific path and achieve time travel to the past.
Yeah, I think in some ways, like for instance, in some of those movies where they did the slingshot around the sun, using the heavy gravity of the sun, that's where they were trying to capture, some of the science behind it.
Well, we've done those kind of slingshot things with some of our satellites to attain speeds to get outside. Around Jupiter, there's plenty of gravity there, for example. I think we've slingshotting things that way for some time.
So we see from satellites, we see time dilation every day. When we have satellites that are on the opposite side of the sun from Earth, we can actually measure the time dilation due to gravity. We see the delays in the signals coming from the satellite due to the gravity of the sun. These are all, again, it's all science facts.
Doppler effect.
In that case, it's more of it's a byproduct of Einstein's general relativity that heavy gravity, so the signal travels a longer path or a shorter path.
Well, a spacecraft way the hell out there should be able to get a signal back here at the speed of light. And are you suggesting to me that either it's getting here faster or slower as a result of the gravitational fields that it encounters on the way?
Absolutely. This is measured. This has been measured. I mean, it's measured. I won't say dozens, hundreds of times.
Well, then aren't they sitting there scratching their heads, saying, "What the hell's going on?"
Oh no. Actually, in this case, when you talk about the effect of general relativity on a small scale, dilating a signal so it comes back 2 seconds or a couple hundred milliseconds later than it should because it's passing nearby the sun.
Right.
That's a minor thing. It's relatively insignificant, but when you talk about increasing that to the point where Frank Tipler's model took it, where you're close enough to heavy gravity for a long enough time, you literally can do it. And what's interesting, Art, nobody in the world, no physicists, no mathematicians, since Frank Tipler published his paper in 1965, can disprove it. And it's a great place. If somebody wants to study some of the fundamentals of time travel to the past, start with the work done by Frank Tipler.
Rotating.
Yeah, actually, the name of his paper, you can find it. You can find some information on our website under Tipler cylinders or rotating cylinders.
Tipler cylinders. What specifically were they physically?
His was a theoretical model of a large, massive spinning cylinder. And actually, we have
You know what that reminds me of? I'm sure there's no way in the world you missed seeing the movie Contact.
No, I didn't see it. You're absolutely right.
Do you remember the giant machine?
Yes.
Do you remember the giant rotating cylinder? The rotations within rotations?
Yes, I remember that.
Did that seem really logical to you?
And believe it or not, there's a couple theories about time travel to the past. I'm going to answer your question a little bit roundabout. That one is using a Tipler cylinder, a rotating cylinder, you can accomplish reverse time travel. The other is the possibility of a wormhole. One of the new ones put together by, I'm going to get his name wrong, Gott from Princeton University, I forgot his first name, was something called cosmic string.
String theory.
A little bit different. The concept is with a rotating cylinder, there's a theoretical object in space that might be a remnant of the Big Bang called a hypothetical cosmic string. And if that was to pass by a spinning mass, it could create warp space-time.
Doctor, holy smokes, hold it right there. We'll be right back.
03. This is Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell from the Kingdom of Nine.
Very good friend of mine, just back from an overseas trip, sends the following. the subject contains within it the ultimate enigma. And I'm reminded of this observation. Time is God's way of keeping everything from happening all at once. Now, if we can just find a way to counter this entropy thing, your guest's exciting work may provide an incredible step in this direction. Dr. David Anderson will be right back. All right, once again, Dr. David. Doctor, very quickly, a couple of things have come in. A lot of faxes are just pouring in here. I'd love to say the following. De Palma, in the mid-60s, put an FM receiver above a shielded, rotating mass, and the received frequency was shifted radically. Now, is that time travel or space-time alteration? Rotation, rotation, rotation.
Yeah, it seems to be a common element, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Could you mention the name of the person who did the experiment again?
De Palma. And here's another one. He put a clock over a rotating mass, and that clock slowed down. Again, a rotating mass, angular momentum equals changing space-time constants.
Well, you know, as I mentioned, I'm not familiar specifically with this now.
But the name doesn't matter. But does the theory sound to you?
If the mass was extremely large, then the theory is very consistent with Einstein's general theory of relativity. If the mass is small, then there would need to be something for that type of time dilation to occur, time variance to occur.
All right. Here's one. Hi, Art. I'm interested in time travel, but wonder how it can be determined that time warping is the real effect being achieved and not some other effect that relates to time travel. Can it absolutely be determined actual time acceleration or deceleration for that matter?
Our experimentation is completely quantitative. Our reference instrumentation that we've used, like I said, we didn't do this just off of simply our test with plant seedlings. We've used plant seedlings, germination cycles. We've used electrical clocks. We've used mechanical clocks. And we've accumulated the data. We've done the test. And actually, that part of the testing is behind us. We have that part done.
With how much trepidation do you approach the next volley of tests?
Well,
and what are they?
The next volley of tests is to compete, is to continue to work on what we're doing with the reservation. But the real big next step for us, Art, is to move into a living tissue or a live animal testing, which, you know, testing with animals or living organisms is a very controversial area, but even more so, a lot of people feel our experimentation into the study of time is blasphemy or is something that we shouldn't be doing.
Well, I'm not sure of that myself. In other words, I do have questions. Since we don't, and we discussed this earlier, you freely admit we don't understand the nature of time, then we don't understand whether it's going to be, in essence, some sort of blasphemy, do we?
I don't.
That's a hard question.
No, it's a wonderful question. Those are the best kind of questions, Art. Is that I don't feel it's blasphemy. I think the nature of time, again, and our lack of understanding it, is really, again, just a place where our mind is bumping into its own limitation. I mean, we live in a wonderful universe, a wonderful world filled with all kinds of magic. We just don't see it and we don't understand it all the time. And that doesn't mean pursuing this is a wrong thing to do. Pursuing it with danger or risk to life would be a wrong thing to do. But pursuing time control technology and all the benefits that it's already showing us, and that, again, we hope to have this in everyday application within the next 5 to 10 years.
So you really see nothing good morality and ethics involved?
Yeah, our biggest concern sometimes is could this technology be perverted or used for purposes?
Well,